There comes a moment in every person's life, quiet or violent, when the mask is ripped off, when the identity you built, the one you protected, the one you believed would shield you from pain, shatters. And in that shattering, something ancient, something eternal stirs from within. We spend our lives building monuments to the ego. We decorate them with titles, status, validation, applause. We stand proudly at the center of our own kingdoms, mistaking control for purpose and visibility for value. But God does not anoint the proud. He does not speak to the voice that shouts over others or the mind that clings to image. He whispers to the broken. He calls from the ruins, because before God can use a man, he must empty him. Not out of cruelty, but out of mercy. Because what you call breaking, God calls becoming. What you call loss, he calls alignment. He is not destroying you. He is destroying what was never truly you. Look at the greats. Look at those who touched eternity. Abraham was asked to sacrifice his only son. Moses was exiled into the wilderness before he ever led a nation. Joseph was betrayed, sold, imprisoned, forgotten before he was ever crowned. Jesus himself was ridiculed, beaten, and crucified before he was glorified. Why? Because to carry divine purpose, you must be emptied of the worldly self. The ego cannot sit on the throne if the soul is to lead. And so God breaks you not to bury you, but to resurrect the version of you that can carry the weight of what he has planned. He crushes your pride so that humility can be born. He silences your plans so that vision can be restored. He removes the audience so that your integrity can be tested in the dark. And that hurts. It hurts to lose what you once idolized. It hurts to be stripped of identity, certainty, and control. It feels like death, because in a way it is the death of self, the death of who you thought you had to be in order to be worthy. But the soul cannot be destroyed. It can only be revealed. You were not created for applause. You were created for impact, and real impact begins in surrender. See, ego fights, ego clings, ego argues, but the soul listens. It yields. It follows the quiet pull toward purpose, and purpose never needs to shout. It knows who sent it. You've been lied to, told that success is about domination, that greatness comes from being seen. But the greatest people who ever lived walked through hell quietly. They were tested in private before they were trusted in public. Ego says, look at me. But the soul says, use me. And when God hears that, when he sees a man or woman drop their need to be the hero, drop their obsession with credit, drop their desperation for validation, he moves, he lifts, he builds through that surrendered vessel. But make no mistake, that surrender doesn't happen in comfort. It doesn't happen at the top of the mountain. It happens in the pit, in the darkness, in the seasons where nothing makes sense and every plan falls apart. You may call it a setback. He calls it the classroom. You may call it failure. He calls it foundation, because what he builds to last. Temporary confidence built on ego will always collapse, but eternal strength built on character, that endures storms. Thomas Edison failed 10,000 times in the dark before the world ever saw light. Carnegie shoveled coal with blistered hands before he ever wrote checks that changed history. Lincoln lost elections, faced heartbreak, battled depression before leading a divided nation. None of these men were strangers to breaking, because greatness doesn't come from what you avoid. It comes from what you survive and what you become in the process. God is not interested in preserving your comfort. He is interested in awakening your soul. He is not interested in leaving you where you are. He is interested in who you were created to become. And if that requires stripping you of everything that props up your ego, so be it. Better to be stripped and rebuilt by heaven than praised and propped up by illusions. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. Prepared for something heavier than your image. prepared for something holier than your ambition, prepared for a life so rooted in truth that storms don't shake it, failure doesn't break it, and praise doesn't inflate it. But to reach that place, you must let go. Let go of the idea that your worth is measured by what you produce. Let go of the need to control how people see you. Let go of the fear that if you stop striving, you'll stop mattering. Let go so God can move in. You see, your soul has always known the truth. It has always known that the applause fades, that the achievements don't fill the void, that beneath every goal was the desire to be seen, not by the world, but by God. And the moment you stop chasing the world, the moment you fall to your knees, when all you have left is your breath and your belief, that's when the real work begins. Not the work of the hands, but the work of becoming, the soul work, the holy fire that refines, reshapes, rebuilds. And when you rise from that fire, you will not be who you were. You will not want what you wanted. You will not speak how you used to speak, because you will no longer be driven by ego. You will be guided by calling. And that calling won't always make sense. It won't always look impressive, but it will be right. It will burn with conviction. It will stretch your faith and sharpen your focus. Because now you walk with God, not just toward Him. Now you serve, not to be praised, but because you were chosen. Now you build, not to prove, but because you were prepared. Now you rise, not by force, but by faith. And people won't always understand it. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you've lost your edge. Let them, because they didn't see the night you broke. They didn't hear the silence you sat in. They didn't feel the weight God placed in your spirit. This isn't about them. It never was. It's about alignment. You were never called to climb ladders. You were called to move mountains. You were never called to fit in. You were called to be set apart. And sometimes the only way to be set apart is to be broken apart. So if you find yourself in a season of breaking, if you feel like everything you once leaned on has collapsed, don't run, don't numb, don't hide, lean in. Ask the deeper question, what is God removing so that He can reveal? What is dying so that something truer can be born? Because He's not trying to destroy you, He's trying to awaken you. And when the ego dies, when the mask finally falls, when all that's left is raw truth and real faith, you will be more powerful than you've ever been. Not because you have more, but because you've become more, because you now live from the soul, unshaken, unmoved, unstoppable. They did not think about if. They thought about how. They did not wonder whether the world would approve. They assumed the world would follow once they proved the vision real. That's the difference between ordinary and unstoppable. Ordinary people seek validation. Unstoppable people declare intention and demand alignment. And that kind of thinking is not genetic. It's not a gift. It's trained. Just like muscle, just like grit. You become what you dwell on. If you feed your mind hesitation, it will starve your momentum. But if you flood it daily with vision, clear, intense, emotionally charged vision, then even failure will bend before you. Because failure does not stop the man with a made-up mind. Failure only redirects him. That's how Carnegie built an empire from steel. That's how Lincoln stood firm in the face of a divided, violent nation. That's how Oprah rose from trauma and poverty to command attention with just her presence. They had mastered the inner game, and the inner game always dictates the outer world. Most people are taught to think reactively, to let the world define their worth, to interpret events emotionally, not strategically. But the ones who bend the world don't react, they declare. They declare who they are, what they want, where they're going, and then they bend their environment to match that declaration. You think you need motivation, but what you really need is dominion, the ability to sit alone in a room, conjure a future no one else can see, and move toward it with so much faith that the world begins to believe in it too. That's the seed of every miracle. That's how mountains move. It's not by waiting, it's by willing. And will is not loud. It doesn't shout or boast. It just moves day after day, hour after hour, action after action, until momentum becomes law. When you think like this, excuses feel like poison. Blame becomes laughable. Waiting becomes intolerable. Because you've tasted the truth, your world is plastic, malleable, shaped by focus, shaped by repetition, shaped by belief, and you'll refuse to go back. That's the awakening. That's when you stop chasing and start commanding, not people, not events, but yourself. And when you command yourself with ruthless clarity, the world follows. That's not arrogance. That's alignment with purpose, with potential, with the very laws of creation. And nothing, no obstacle, no rejection, no delay can stand against someone who has decided, not just hoped, not just wished, but decided that this mind, this life, this moment will not be wasted. The world doesn't bend for talent. It doesn't kneel for good intentions. It bends only for the mind that refuses to yield. It yields to the individual who has trained their thoughts to be weaponized, focused, and unshakable. Because the truth is brutal. Your reality bends not to what you want, but to who you are and who you believe yourself to be. If you walk into the world hoping to be approved, it will hand you rejection. If you wait for permission, it will give you silence. But if you walk with the conviction that reality will reorganize itself around your will, then slowly, painfully, inevitably, it will. This is the law that built every empire. This is the truth behind every titan. It's not magic. It's not mystery. It's the mind. Train the mind, and the world obeys. Ignore it, and the world breaks you. Napoleon Hill said, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." But he didn't stop there. He also warned, if you fail to discipline your thinking, if you allow fear, doubt, and other people's limitations to rent space in your head, then you become a prisoner in a cage you built yourself. The cage is invisible. That's what makes it dangerous. It looks like excuses. It sounds like logic. It feels like safety. But it's not safety. It's slow death. You were not born to think like the crowd. You were born to lead your own mind, and in doing so, bend the world into shape. So how do you think like that? You begin by mastering the most dangerous battlefield in existence, your thoughts. Because every thought is a seed, every belief is a blueprint, and the world builds itself around the architecture of your dominant mental patterns. If your thoughts are cloudy, your path will be uncertain. If your thoughts are rooted in fear, your outcomes will mirror it. But if your thoughts are clear, forceful, filled with vision, then the world begins to mirror your clarity, not because it owes you, not because you asked, but because you've aligned with a law that predates you. Edison used it to bring light to the world. Ford used it to put every man behind the wheel. Disney used it to turn dreams into landscapes. None of them waited. None of them begged. They saw the future in their minds and moved with such intensity that the world had no choice but to adapt. That is what it means to think like this. To think with such clarity, belief, and purpose that the world must respond.